Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. My pleasure to be here with you. I am so excited to be sharing the findings of the Work 3.0 research with you. And I don't know what David told you about me. I can't understand that, so I thought I'll start a little bit with self-introduction. So I'm Diana. I am with Center for Creative Leadership, which is a global organization that dedicates itself to the study of the best practices of leadership development. So we do not do anything else. We just focus on how best develop leaders around the world. I personally stayed more than half of my life in Asia. I spent 19 years in China and now close to 6 years in Singapore. And I feel that in many aspects, Asia is actually leading the way. There's a lot of innovation, a lot of very dynamic businesses and development that we're all seeing in Asia. And it's very curious, very interesting for me to see how organizations in Asia, and I'll show you some of the data from our research, are adapting to this new way of working that we call hybrid. So as David mentioned, the topic of the research is Work 3.0, reimagining leadership in a hybrid world. And the word reimagining is very important here because the way we work has changed and will continue to change. And we need to reimagine the way we engage our teams, the way we collaborate, the way we drive results. And that's what this research is about. So Center for Creative Leadership has a privilege to partner with 15 organizations in 13 countries across the region because we wanted to have a broad perspective and understand how different countries are adopting to the changes in the way we work. And of course, it was our privilege to partner with CCL Global in South Korea. And thank you to David and the team to organizing this event and inviting me here. In the process of this research, we've collected close to 2,200 responses of the survey, and we interviewed close to 30 very senior leaders to learn about the best practices of how to make hybrid working work. So let us start. David, is this okay? You can, with the translation? Yeah, not too fast? Tell me if you need me to slow down. So let's start by thinking about the definition of hybrid working. What does it mean working in a hybrid world, right? So what the chart that you see here, right, looks at different forms, different models that have been adopted, right? So let's look at it. In the center, you see hybrid office first, hybrid remote first. So for the purposes of this research, we define hybrid as a way of working where some of the time we work remotely from home or elsewhere, and some of the time we work from the office, right? So office first means employees spend more time in the office than remotely, and remote first means less time in the office, right? However, these are not the only models, right? So you can see that we look at complete flexibility, right? Basically work from anywhere, manage your time, it's all up to you. On the other side of the spectrum, 100% back to the office because there are a lot of companies that are still doing that. Then a lot of companies, well not a lot, some companies, are experimenting with a short work week. So it's a different aspect of flexibility, right? And then we have some other forms that are not very prevalent, right? Why is this important? We need to remember that hybrid working is only one aspect of the future of work topic, right? Where we work from is only one problem that we need to solve, right? And we'll keep talking about it throughout this presentation. The nature of our work is changing. how we get our work is done. Who is working for us is changing. There are more and more contractors, people who just work on the project, the gig workers, right? So the workforce is becoming much more diverse, even in the way the labor relationship they have with our organization. I was just discussing this morning with David the topic of generative AI. So the chat GPT, everybody is discussing it right now, right? Generative AI is going to significantly change the way we work, because AI will be able to do a lot of the tasks that we are doing now, right? So if I'm a lawyer, AI can write a draft contract for me, right? So the people who are promoting AI and educating the world about AI right now, they talk about human-AI collaboration. That's a problem that we need to be thinking. That's the future that is coming at us very, very soon, right? So whether we work from home or office, that's not the biggest problem that we as HR leaders need to be considering. But it's a problem that we are facing right now, right? So we all feel there's quite a lot of urgency to look at how are we adopting the concept and how to make it work. So these are the two topics that we will keep discussing throughout the session today. In our research, we ask a question. We wanted to take a little bit future-focused look. So we ask a question. In 3 to 5 years from now, what do you believe will be preferred model of working? Right? So all of the percentages that you see here, these are the responses from all across the APAC. So this is the average APAC data, not Korea data, right? So you see that majority of people that we asked in this survey, they believe, so 43.4% are saying office first, but still hybrid, right? So maybe it's 4 days a week we spend in the office, or 3 days, but we will be having that flexible arrangement with most of our time in the office, followed by another 15.2% remote first. So absolute majority of surveys are saying that 3 to 5 years from now, there will be hybrid working, right? A quite significant percentage, what surprised me, 18% are saying it will be complete flexibility, right? And you can already see certain companies like Google, for example, right, adopting work from anywhere. You can be anywhere you want as long as you're getting your work done, we are fine, right? You are seeing more and more companies joining Netflix. You know what Netflix is very famous for? They do not limit the number of annual leave you take. So there's no such thing. There are 5, 10 days, 15 days a year. You take as much leave as you want. And when Netflix started doing it, I think they were the only one. Now more and more companies, mainly technology companies, but not only, are joining them in that, right? So the world, whether we want it or not, whether we're comfortable with it or not, but the world is moving more and more towards flexibility. And as HR leaders, our role is to help our business leaders in our companies and our organizations to find the best way of deal with this trend, because the trend is not going away, right? The preference, the expectations, the younger generation of workers, of our workforce, have of their jobs, of their companies, is autonomy, flexibility, and purpose, right? And maybe we feel in many countries in Asia, it's maybe slowly happening, but it is happening. And the more percentage of younger workers you will have in your organization, the higher the expectation will be of company offering them that flexibility. So it's not a matter of when or if, it's a matter of how quickly we adopt. So why is it so difficult? Why are there so many leaders? And the data in the research shows us that majority of leaders are struggling with buying in, believing in hybrid, and then making it work. Why is it so difficult? A lot of people think, well, during the pandemic, a lot of us work from home all the time. and we made it work. It was quite tough. It was very tiring, but we made it work, right? Well, now we just sometime from the office, sometime from home, no problem. That's a very mistaken way of thinking about it. The reason that leaders are struggling to adopt this mindset and believe in hybrid, because there's a lot of uncertainty. We do not know how. And if anybody tells you, I know the right model of a hybrid working, do not believe them. Nobody knows. Everybody is just trying to find a way and trying to experiment. And that is why we wanted to do this research. We wanted to see what are some of the best practices and how to make it work. So when we create this hybrid model, whether it's office first or remote first, doesn't matter, as long as it's a mix, right? We need to understand that we need to completely redesign, rethink, reimagine the way teams interact across the organization, the way leaders engage their teams, the way we drive results, right? So for a lot of leaders, you tell them, wow, the well-being increases, the satisfaction increases if we allow flexibility, right? It's a great way of attracting young talent. They will listen to that and say, yeah, but first I need to drive my business results. I cannot let business suffer, right? Well-being and engagement, I'll think about it later. I understand. I'm a business leader too. I respect that, right? But we need to understand that there's no way of escaping from it, right? If we do not satisfy that need for autonomy and flexibility, our talented people will leave us. The moment they have other options, they will take that, right? So the managers, the leaders really need to find a way to manage the tension. There's a lot of tension and uncertainty. Flexibility is great, but what if productivity drops? That is a very valid concern, and there is a tension between that, right? How can I make sure people get their job done? I don't see them, right? Another tension is how much time we spend together, we'll lose the sense of belonging. It's a very real concern, and it can happen if managers do not pay attention and don't find ways of still bringing people together. So if we think about it more deeply, we realize that every aspect of how we work as teams has to be reimagined, and leaders just do not know how. And that's why they are afraid. That's why they say, no, everybody back to the office. Because that's familiar. They know how to manage that, right? Hybrid or remote, for them, is a lot of uncertainty, a lot of risk, right? So how do we help them? How we help them to shift their mindsets and learn the right skills to build highly engaged and highly performing teams in a hybrid world. The first thing we need to consider is there is no one right solution for everyone. Each organization is very unique. We can't all become Googles. That's not possible, and it's not needed, right? So what you see here is a list of some of the key drivers, key aspects that will determine how easy or difficult it is to adopt the hybrid working model and what to consider. The national culture and organizational culture play a very, very big role, right? So we all know, I lived in Asia for a very long time, that a lot of cultures in Asia are quite traditional and quite risk-averse. There's nothing wrong about that. There's no good or bad culture, right? And there's a lot of beauty in tradition. But what it means that when the change is coming at us, the preference is keep the status quo, right? In this particular situation, it will not serve as well. We need to help our leaders to get out of that status quo mindset. So we need to acknowledge our national culture determines how we behave to a very large extent. Our organizational culture is also very important. Why was it so easy for tech companies to switch to fully remote or hybrid? Because they were built for it. There are a lot of processes of remote collaboration already built in how they work, right? They have their technical talent spread all over the world. So there was not much challenge for them. compare that to a traditional company that, let's say, manufacturing. People have to be at the plant, right? Or retail. People have to be at the store. Or banks, financial services, they're so risk averse. Risk management is a big part of what they do, right? So the organizational culture, the sector, the industry that you are in, what kind of roles you have in your organization will matter a lot when you decide how much flexibility can I allow. Another very important aspect is the demographics of your workforce, right? The generation, the more younger people you have in your organization, the more urgency is there to experiment and give them that flexibility and autonomy that they so much want. Another important issue that I want to highlight is the senior leader personality and their values. Sometimes we underestimate how much it matters, right? Very often, at the very top, the senior leaders, they value community. They really want to see people coming together. Or maybe control is very important for them. They want to feel in control. And giving flexibility to people might threaten that sense of being in control. So that is also a very important factor that we need to build into our considerations. So my message here is, there is no one way of doing it, and each company needs to find its own way. Even if it's a little bit, even if it's, let's say, one day a week, that's already a good start, right? What we cannot afford to do is do nothing, right? Because we will start losing people who will go to other companies that will offer that flexibility. So my advice, my suggestion for all of us is to take a real honest look at our organization, our culture, what kind of leaders we have, what kind of demographics we have, who is working for us, and see where do we start? How much flexibility can we afford to begin with? And then start experimenting. Another interesting data point that I just wanted to show you to prove that, the message that I gave you just a second ago. So this is Korean data. This is no longer APAC data, right? So we asked the people that we surveyed is, what kind of organizational culture is best to enable hybrid working, right? So what are the characteristics of organizational culture that supports that flexibility while still ensuring that the results are achieved? And these are the ratings. So this is very interesting. Look at what's the 65.9%, accountability. The next one, openness and transparency. So what it tells us that there's a very clear understanding that flexibility comes with a lot of responsibility. So company cultures that already have, very leaders who are skilled at setting goals and keeping people accountable to achieving those goals, if you have that type of organizational culture, it will be much easier to adopt various models of hybrid working, right? So we all understand that the business results cannot suffer. Another very interesting point is structured work environment. So while people want flexibility, they also want structure. Too much uncertainty or too much flexibility without any guidelines or any clear processes, people get confused, right? And then the work is not efficient. So that, for me, was very, very interesting, that leaders fully understand that the only way of making hybrid method or mode of working work is to build a culture of accountability, transparency, and having clear structures and processes in the organization. And that is what's very important for leaders, people who lead teams, to learn how to do and get much, much better at doing this. Another very important point that our research determined, and that was a surprise for me, I did not expect that not everybody thrives in the flexible working or hybrid working, right? So what you see on this chart is we look at people who are top performers, average performers, and bottom performers. And we wanted to see how their engagement and productivity was impacted by hybrid working, right? And what do you see? That people who are already top performers, they thrive. Their engagement went up significantly. Their productivity went up significantly, right? So they just feel enabled, trusted, less time commuting, I can achieve better results. But not everybody thrived, right? So you see those who are on the bottom performer side, their engagement and their productivity dropped. So over 50% of respondents said that they saw the productivity engagement drop. Right? So one company that we interviewed for this research, when we are trying to see, so what do you do about it? Right? Because it was a surprise to us. So the HR leader in that company said that they have a new policy that we allow you to work remotely as long as you are meeting the expectations in your performance. So if you are achieving your goals, if your performance is great, be flexible. We trust you. But for people who, whenever the performance drops, right, they will ask them to come back to the office for 3 months. Because they say, you need support. You need more structure. You need more supervision. You need coaching. Right? So that became a policy. And people know that as long as I'm meeting my goals, the company will trust me to manage my time. Right? Is it a right way or wrong way? We'll see. But this is just an example of how a company said it is a problem, and we will have a policy to manage that problem. So far, they're saying they're quite satisfied with the results. And people don't mind. People recognize, okay, I'm not doing so well. I need more support. So just wanted to give you this practical example of how a company developed new policy to manage this risk, because the risk is there. Now let's talk about leaders. Right? So as HR professionals, as leaders of HR, we cannot do a lot on our own. We are there to support the business leaders to drive business results and build a high-performing culture. Right? So we wanted to see what are some of the mindset and skill set that leaders really need to focus on and develop that will enable them to be really successful in leading their teams in this hybrid world and hybrid working environment. So this is what we found, right? Growth mindset, trust, right? A leader who is trusting and believes that my team is strong, my team is motivated, people genuinely want to do a good work, I trust them to do that without much supervision. Coupled with accountability, right? So it's this balance between trust and empowerment, but keeping people accountable for meeting their goals. And boundary spanning means breaking silos, breaking boundaries between the teams, right? And we'll talk about that later. And then in the attributes or skills, characteristics, right? Communication is very important. Working in a hybrid world requires leaders to significantly improve their communication skills because we spend less time together. Being very good in setting expectations, right? Very clear expectation, because that's how you drive accountability. People have to be crystal clear of what's expected of them, and so on. And learning agility, of course, right? So if you're familiar with CCL Global, they are delivering a Lead for Success program, right, that CCL has designed. And that program is specifically focusing on self-awareness, right? The more better leaders understand themselves, the more they can improve and develop, learning agility, communication, and so on. So these are some fundamental, very foundational capabilities that leaders need to develop. And then, based on how strong this mindset and skill sets are, we have segmented leaders in 4 categories, right? So you see, on one side, we look at mindset readiness. So how much they believe that hybrid is the way to go, right? That the flexible working is the way to go. And then how strong they are. So are they ready on the mindset and are they ready on the skill? So the leaders who were strong in both, we call them champions. So they believe that some form of hybrid working is the best future, and they have the right skills that we've listed here, right? So these are some of the top skills. Then on these corners, so those who are high in the mindset, so they believe, they buy in, but low on skill. Maybe they just don't know how. Those are hopefuls, right? Then we have skeptics. They have the skill, they just don't believe hybrid is the way to go. Everybody back to the office. That's what they prefer. And then laggards are those that are low in both, right? So the percentages that you see here, this is the APAC data. So across APAC, we see that a decent amount of leaders, close to 42%, are actually in the champion. And if you look at the research, some countries are much higher than the others. So this is the average. And then still quite a lot of skeptics. 30%, they know how to lead their teams in the hybrid world, but they just know it's better to come back to the office. While at the same time, majority of surveys are telling us future is hybrid, right? So we know that, but there are a lot of senior leaders are still quite skeptical about that. So now let's look at Korean data. So how are leaders in Korea comparing to their peers across APAC, right? So this is our APAC data. This is the South Korean data. I'll give you a second to digest. What do you think? How does that look? Right? So what we see is the probably half, right? Slightly more than half. Comparing to APAC data, leaders are in the champion box, right? So why is that, right? You can see that the percentage of skeptics is slightly higher, right? So leaders who have the skill but just not adopting it, do not believe in hybrid, is a good model, right? And you can see hopefuls are just slightly higher and significantly more laggards, right? So what does it tell us, right? And of course, this is the average data. Every company will, have their unique situation. What does it tell us? There's an opportunity for leaders in Korea to work on both on their mindset, shifting their mindset and recognizing it's like digital transformation. You cannot avoid it, right? And also then developing the right skills of how to be better leaders to provide that clarity and accountability, balance with trust and empowerment to their teams, right? So we can see, quite a lot of space for leaders to work on themselves. When you read the research, you will see that Singapore and Australia are leading in the region in terms of how many champions we have. So in terms of the adoption of a hybrid work, as well as the skills. And I can tell you from my personal experience working in Singapore, that Singapore government has spent quite a lot of time, strongly encouraging companies in Singapore to adopt hybrid working. So basically telling them, do it, right? Offer that flexibility to your workers. So I thought that was quite interesting. But let's keep moving. We ask a question, as I said, what are the key mindsets that will enable the leader to be a rock star of hybrid leadership? So this is Korean data. And see of what are the two top mindset, trusting, so learning to trust your teams, right? Young people, if you have a lot of young people in your organization, right? They think, well, you hired me, you brought me into your team because you believe I have the right skill and the right motivation. So why don't you trust me to do a good job working from home? Why do I need to be in the office? Why do you need to know when I come in and when I leave? If my work is done to a high standard, what's wrong with that? But accountability is very, very important. Another one is just being flexible and open to change, right? Flexible mindset. And this is the rating on the skills, or attributes, right? So we always look at mindset versus skill set. Communication. Working in a remote or hybrid way requires leaders to be significantly more proficient in very clear and encouraging communication, right? Especially in the goal setting and providing feedback, right? A lot of people ask me, is there a different skill of providing feedback when we work in, talk in person versus virtual? My answer is no. A good skill is the same. A good feedback is the same whether I sit in front of you or I see you in a Zoom window. What is different is that when we are all working from the office, a lot of conversations happen naturally. We just had a client presentation, we discuss it, right? So a lot of feedback, it just happens because we are talking about it, right? Whereas when we work remotely, we had a client call, we dropped off Zoom, we don't talk. Right? So leaders need to be much more intentional in finding ways to provide very frequent feedback so people know how they are doing versus their goals, right? And keeping people accountable. So that's a Korean data. So this is what leaders in Korea believe are the key mindsets and skill sets that they themselves need to be successful in leading in a hybrid world. So I thought that was very useful for us as HR leaders to identify the development opportunities that we can provide to our leaders. Now let's talk a little bit about leading teams. One of the biggest concerns and biggest risks that we hear about when talking about hybrid working is the teams lose connection. The teams lose sense of belonging. There's less collaboration. It is a very real risk. Absolutely real, very valid concern. But it's not the reason not to do hybrid. It's just the leaders need to learn how to drive performance and create connection at the same time. And this is a very simple framework. We call it 4C framework that we've created that kind of can guide you as HR leaders how to develop that capability, right? So it starts with the core. The team needs to understand, and the leader needs to create the clarity about why we are a team. What is the purpose of our team? What are we trying to achieve? And how we work that together, right? We can't just let it be and think people will figure it out. This is where leadership starts. We are a team for a reason. Right? We are serving a purpose in this organization. Let's all be aligned around what that purpose is and how we'll be working together as a team. Right? Then to build on that, we look at our collective mindsets. What do we as a team believe in? Do we believe in trust or do we believe in control? Do we believe in formal communication or informal communication? Right? So this is very important. We need to explore our team beliefs and create that alignment, right? How do we show trust to each other? And how we keep each other accountable? How we give feedback? What are the rules, the boundaries of everyone, right? Like, for example, I'm okay having evening calls, but I have a colleague who has a young child, she can't do it. Right? So I cannot cross your boundary. These are all team agreements that a good leader with like a team charter. When we're all in the office, we had certain unspoken team agreements. We need to create new ones, right? That will provide clarity to everyone. This is how we work. This is what we believe in, especially around trust versus accountability, right? Very, very important. Then, the other two is cohesive relationship within the team. A leader needs to curate positive experiences when the team comes together, right? It's a human nature to want connection. I just observed how happy all of you were during the icebreaker, meeting your peers, talking about your organizations, very joyful. We all want that, right? And the leader needs to think, okay, we all work separately a lot. How do I bring the team together in a very meaningful way? Is it for brainstorming? Is it for some social events? Is it for some co-creation, collaboration process, that is the job of a leader to curate that. That people feel very happy to go back to the office because they're meeting other people and interacting. Connection talks about across the teams. So what our data shows that during the pandemic, when we all had to work virtually, the relationship within a team suffered significantly less than relationship between the teams. Right? So let's say between functions or different business units, because people still had to stay in touch with their teammates to get work done. But the natural communication that happens across departments or levels that happens in the office just went away. So a good leader, a strong leader, needs to find a way to connect their team to other teams. So they do not lose a sense that we are part of a larger organization and part of a larger mission. Right? So again, when we are thinking about developing a leader ability to drive high-performing teams, teams that stay engaged, and teams that stay connected to the organizational purpose, these are the 4 C steps that the leaders, we recommend that the leaders follow and build their capability around. Another way to look at leadership in a hybrid world, maybe not through mindset or skill set, because this is HR language, right? Sometimes business leaders, they don't understand that. What is a mindset, right? But what they understand is the role they need to play. As a leader, what roles do you play in the organization? And when I say role, it's not your title or your job. The role that we all contribute to our companies. So these are the 5 roles that we have identified that if leaders play well, they'll be very successful in both achieving their business outcomes and creating a culture of engagement and collaboration and belonging. So let me start with, I think for Korea this is very relevant, risk-averse gambler, right? And you will see that every name, we want it to be funny here, every name has a kind of a tension there. How can you be a gambler and risk-averse at the same time? Well, you have to be. So what does it mean? A lot of leaders do not embrace hybrid because they feel it's too uncertain and too risky. Right? So then, better we do the old normal. We'll bring everybody back to the office. What we need to encourage them is to say, it is here. The trend is not going away. People want it. Let's embrace it. So the gambler is a person who embraces that risk while recognizing the risk is real. And we need to mitigate it, right? So on one side, we say, okay, let's try. On the other side, we experiment. We take incremental steps. We analyze the risk and find solution to all of them. I'm afraid that the productivity will drop. Let's have a process or policy around that. I'm afraid that people will lose connection. Let's think of how we create connection. But we will embrace this risk and we will start experimenting. So I find that in a lot of Asian countries, this is one of the first roles that if leaders adopt, then it's easier to start from there. Wellness hunter. This is a very important one. A lot of people report increased levels of stress and burnout when working fully remotely on a hybrid. Too many meetings, back-to-back Zoom calls, lack of movement, lack of human interaction. Leaders need to recognize that. So while we encourage flexibility, right, and we still I still hunt for my business success, leaders really need to think of how to improve the well-being of their teams. They need to encourage them to take breaks, not to do too many meetings. So finding that balance between driving for business results and not burning out, very important. And I feel a lot of leaders still do not recognize how important it is, right? Because burnout is a very, very real issue. Cat herder. Again, tension. Cats are very independent. So on one side, the leader needs to encourage that flexibility. I trust you to manage your time. I trust that you will do the right thing. Herder is that bringing people together, constantly curating great experiences of in-person interaction, collaboration, or even if in-person is not possible, still virtual, but collaboration and coming together, both formal and informal, right? Another client that we interviewed for this research shared how during the pandemic, they're very concerned about that loss of connection, but regulations do not allow you to come to the office. So they basically did a virtual cooking class. Right? So somebody was in the office alone, cooking in the pantry, and then other people, they were sent ingredients, and they were cooking from their home with a Zoom and camera, and they had a lot of fun, right? So that's just one example, right? So basically, a leader needs to very intentionally to curate a collaborative creative experiences for his or her team. Next one is anchored imagineer. Again, tension. Imagine something new, but be very grounded and very anchored, right? So we need to constantly think of how the future of work is evolving. Leaders need to imagine that, the way they need to imagine their business being disrupted by new technologies. It's the same, right? At the same time, people need structure and they need to be grounded, right? So work on the processes. Give people that clarity and direction, but be bold and still imagine how the future of work, future of your team might look like. And the very last is a tech-savvy humanist. So on one side, it's technology. Another side is the human, right? Working remotely or working in a hybrid world relies on technology. We need good collaborative tools to do that. And to be honest with you, I personally do not find that there are a lot of great tools yet. Right? That we have Zoom, we have MS Teams, but it's still lacking in the user experience quite a lot. But an effective leader understands that technology is just a tool. It's all about humans. So when we decide what technologies to implement or how to implement, we need to keep our team members in the heart of it, right? In the center, and balance the need for human touch, for personal connection with the technology that enables us to be productive and collaborate remotely. So let's help our leaders. I feel like that's our mission as HR practitioners. Let's help our leaders to be more proficient and play these roles at the same time. So as I am finishing my presentation, my message to you is, it is scary, it is quite risky, and there's a lot of uncertainty. We cannot deny that. We also need to acknowledge that each country, each nation, each company has its own unique culture, that our starting point is not the same when we want to adopt hybrid working, right? But as I mentioned, we need to really look at the goal is to drive employee engagement and productivity. They serve the business purpose, right? While looking at other aspects like how do we improve diversity? How do we keep everybody included when we are not together, right? How do we, benchmarking yourself against competition is always very important. If I do not offer this flexibility and my competitors do, or even my indirect competitors, maybe our businesses don't compete, but we compete for talents. If it's the same pay, the same job, and flexibility, I don't think we need to guess where the talent is going to go, right? So consider all of this and start experimenting. Start trying different things and then measuring the result. So this is a quote that I want to leave you with. And remember that ChatGPT, the nature of work is going to change significantly. And we need to be ready to be focusing on that. So let's enable our leaders to be effective in leading in a hybrid world, because the world of 1 or 2 or 3 years from now is going to be much more challenging than just hybrid. That is all I wanted to share with you. Thank you for listening, and I am looking forward to our discussion. Thank you very much.